She looked at him across the mahogany table and said something she'd promised herself she'd never say again. "I don't need your permission." His face went white. Her hands didn't shake this time. That sentence had cost her everything once before. The last time she'd said it, she'd lost a home, a name, nearly her life. But this time, she wasn't 25 and hungry. She wasn't 30 and grieving. She wasn't 35 and trapped. She was 47, a CEO, a billionaire. And the man sitting across from her, her own VP of acquisitions, had just made the mistake of assuming she'd forgotten where she came from. He assumed wrong. That was the moment he realized she'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. This is a golden heart story for every woman who was underestimated, written off, or told she'd already missed her chance. This is about a black woman who survived poverty, grief, violence, and betrayal and built an empire anyway. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about something quieter, something harder. It's about refusing to dim your light, even when the world keeps handing you reasons to disappear. Before we go on, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing more than once? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Her name was Vivian Clarke. At 47, she was the founder and CEO of Clarke Capital, a private equity firm that had quietly reshaped the landscape of minority-owned real estate development across the South. She didn't do interviews. She didn't attend galas unless they were tied to her nonprofit. She showed up. She worked. She left. Her office was on the 19th floor of a steel and glass tower in Atlanta. Minimalist, elegant, no photos on the desk. Just blueprints, contracts, a single potted orchid by the window that she watered every Monday. People said she was intimidating. What they meant was she didn't smile to make them comfortable. His name was Ben Calloway. 51. Her VP of Acquisitions. Harvard MBA, 20 years in finance. White, confident in every room he entered. He joined Clarke Capital 2 years ago. Impressed by Vivian's reputation and even more impressed by her portfolio. But recently, he'd started speaking over her in meetings, suggesting she take a step back, recommending they bring in a partner firm to add credibility. He never said what he meant outright. He didn't have to. The meeting. It was a Thursday. Vivian walked into the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. Ben was already there, along with 2 senior investors, both white men in their 60s. One of them smiled. "Vivian, good to see you. Ben's been walking us through the Detroit project." She didn't sit. "Ben doesn't lead the Detroit project," she said evenly. "I do." Ben's smile didn't move. "Of course. I was just giving them the overview. Thought it saved time." She set her portfolio on the table. "Next time, save time by letting me do my job." Silence. One of the investors cleared his throat. "Vivian, we're all on the same team here." "Are we?" she asked. Her voice was calm. Her eyes were not. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my VP is trying to manage me out of my own deal." Ben's jaw tightened. "That's not what's happening." "Then what is?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation, Vivian saw it. The same look she'd seen before. The look that said, "You've gotten too comfortable. You've forgotten your place." She'd seen that look at 25, working doubles at a diner while her lights got shut off. She'd seen it at 30, signing papers alone in a funeral home. She'd seen it at 35, when her second husband locked the bedroom door from the outside. And she'd promised herself, never again. That moment in the conference room wasn't just about business. It was about every time she'd been told to shrink, every time she'd been expected to say thank you for the crumbs. Vivian didn't raise her voice. She turned to the investors. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. But if Ben has concerns about my leadership, he can bring them to me directly, not behind my back in a room I'm supposed to be running. Ben stood. Vivian, can we talk privately? No. The word landed like a door closing. One of the investors stood awkwardly. We'll circle back next week. They left. Ben stayed. He waited until the door clicked shut. What the hell was that? Vivian didn't look at him. She gathered her files, slow and deliberate. That, she said quietly, was me reminding you who signs your checks. I'm trying to help you. She stopped. Looked up. Help me. Yes, he said. Vivian, you're brilliant. Everyone knows that. But he hesitated. You're not always easy to work with. People talk. They think you're... What? He exhaled. Difficult. Defensive. Like you've got a chip on your shoulder. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It wasn't kind. You're right, Ben. I do have a chip on my shoulder. She stepped closer. It's called survival. She walked out. Ben stood there alone, fists clenched, face red. And for the first time since he joined Clarke Capital, he realized he'd miscalculated. Badly. He thought she needed him. He thought she'd soften. He didn't know what it took to build herself the first time, let alone the second, or the third. That night, Vivian sat in her home office, a converted sunroom overlooking a quiet garden in Buckhead. She poured herself a glass of red wine, opened her laptop, pulled up a file she hadn't looked at in years. Clarke Capital founding documents, 2012, 15 years ago. She'd started the company with $11,000, savings from 3 jobs, a loan from a church elder who believed in her, and a business plan she'd written on a borrowed laptop in a public library. She'd been 32, newly widowed, broke, and angrier than she'd ever been in her life. Flashback, age 25. Vivian grew up in a small town outside of Birmingham, raised by her grandmother after her mother left. She worked checkout at a grocery store, studied at night, barely ate. The power got shut off twice in one winter. She remembers sitting in the dark, wrapped into blankets, doing homework by flashlight. Her grandmother said, "Baby, you're gonna make it. I know you are." Vivian didn't answer. She just kept reading. Flashback, age 30. She met a man named Terrence. Kind. A transit worker with a laugh that made her feel safe. They got married young. Had 5 good years. Then one night, he didn't come home. Car accident. Drunk driver. Gone. Vivian was left with $8,000 in medical debt, no life insurance, and a grief so heavy she learned how to breathe around it. She had no family left, no safety net, just herself. Flashback, age 35. That's when he showed up. His name was Philip Hayes. White, charming, older, worked in commercial real estate. He said all the right things. Took her to dinner, listened, smiled, told her she deserved better. She believed him. They married within a year. And for 6 months it was fine. Then the mask came off. Philip controlled everything. The money, the car, the phone. He belittled her in public, dismissed her in private. And when she pushed back, he pushed harder. One night, she told him she wanted to go back to school. He laughed. "For what? You think you're gonna be somebody?" She said, "I don't need your permission." He slapped her, hard enough that she tasted blood. She left 3 weeks later. No money, no plan. Just a duffel bag and a bus ticket to Atlanta. She was 36. And she swore to God, no man would ever make her small again. Back to the present. Vivian closed the laptop. Took a long sip of wine. Her hands were steady now. She'd built Clarke Capital with nothing. No investors, no mentors, no network, just herself. And now Ben Calloway, another man who thought he knew better, was trying to manage her out of her own company. She smiled. Not this time. She'd survived poverty. She'd survived grief. She'd survived violence. And she'd built an empire from the ashes. But this fight? This one was different. Because this time, she wasn't just surviving. She was winning. The next morning, Vivian called an emergency board meeting. Ben wasn't invited. She presented a full audit of his communications over the past 6 months. Emails, meeting notes, private calls with investors. Every instance where he'd undermined her. Every time he'd positioned himself as the real leader. The board was silent. One board member, Lorraine, a black woman in her 60s, former judge, leaned forward. "What do you want to do, Vivian?" Vivian didn't hesitate. "I want him gone." But Lorraine shook her head. "If you fire him now, he'll claim retaliation. He'll lawyer up, make noise. You know how this goes." Vivian's jaw tightened. "So what do you suggest?" Lorraine smiled, slow and knowing. "You outplay him." Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian did something she hadn't done in years. She let people in. She reached out to 3 other black women CEOs in Atlanta. She had lunch with a journalist who'd been trying to interview her for months. She went on a podcast about women in finance. And slowly, carefully, she started telling her story. Not all of it, but enough. One evening, after a long day, she sat with Lorraine at a wine bar in Midtown. Lorraine poured her a glass. "You did good today." Vivian exhaled. "I hate this part. The visibility, the performance." "I know," Lorraine said gently. "But you're not performing, baby. You're standing. There's a difference." Vivian looked at her. "What if I'm angry? What if people think I'm difficult?" Lorraine finished. "Let them. You didn't build what you built by being easy." Vivian's eyes stung. She looked away. "I'm tired, Lorraine." "I know. I've been fighting my whole life." "I know." Silence. Then Lorraine reached across the table, took Vivian's hand. "But you're still here, and that matters." For the first time in weeks, Vivian let herself breathe. She'd spent so long alone, so long proving she didn't need anyone. But maybe she didn't have to do this part alone. 2 weeks later, Ben made his move. He went to the board privately, claimed Vivian was emotionally unstable, said she was making decisions based on personal grievances, suggested they bring in an outside consultant to evaluate leadership effectiveness. It was a coup. Clean, calculated, designed to sound reasonable. Lorraine called Vivian at midnight. "He's trying to get you removed." Vivian sat up in bed, heart pounding. "What?" "Emergency session. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Vivian closed her eyes. She'd seen this before. The whisper campaigns. The quiet removal. The polite destruction. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in her office, staring at her company's logo on the wall. Clarke Capital. Her name. Her vision. Her life. And they were trying to take it. At 9:55 a.m. Vivian walked into the boardroom. Ben was already seated, calm and composed. The board looked uncomfortable. Vivian set down a folder, and smiled. "Gentlemen, ladies, I understand there's been a concern raised about my leadership." One of the board members shifted. "Vivian, this isn't personal." "It never is," she said softly. She opened the folder. "This is a full financial breakdown of every deal Ben Calloway has overseen in the last 18 months. She slid copies across the table. 3 of them underperformed projections by over 20%. 2 of them were flagged by our compliance team for irregular contractor agreements. And 1 of them..." She paused. is currently under investigation by the SEC for bid rigging. The room went dead silent. Ben's face drained of color. Those were approved by you, Vivian said. You signed off. You managed the vendors. You buried the red flags. She leaned forward. So if we reevaluate her ship effectiveness, let's start there. One of the board members cleared his throat. Ben, what do you say? Ben stammered. This is she's twisting. Vivian didn't raise her voice. I'm not twisting anything. I'm holding you accountable. She stood. I've spent my entire life being questioned, doubted, undermined, and I'm done. She looked around the table. If this board doesn't trust me to run the company I built, then I'll walk. But I'll take my investors, my portfolio, and my reputation with me. She picked up her folder. Your move. And she left. She'd said what she came to say. She'd drawn her line. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. 2 hours later, Lorraine called. They voted. Vivian's heart stopped. Ben's out. Effective immediately. Vivian exhaled, slow and shaking. And me? Lorraine laughed softly. Baby, you're untouchable. That night, Vivian stood in her office, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. She thought about the girl in the dark apartment with the flashlight, the young widow sitting alone in a funeral home, the woman who ran with nothing but a bus ticket and a heartbeat. And she realized she'd never stopped running. Until now. If this story reminds you of a woman in your life who refused to break, share it with her. Let her know she's not alone. 3 months later, Clarke Capital announced its most ambitious project yet, a $200 million affordable housing development across 4 southern cities, led by Vivian Clarke, funded by a coalition of minority investors, designed to create generational wealth for families like hers. At the groundbreaking ceremony, a reporter asked her, Miss Clarke, what does this moment mean to you? Vivian smiled. Not the polite smile. The real one. It means I'm still here. She looked directly into the camera. And I'm not dimming my light for anyone. Thank you for being here. For listening. For witnessing a story that so many women live but rarely get to tell. This is Golden Heart Stories, and we're here for every woman who's been underestimated, overlooked, or told it's too late. It's not. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support keeps us telling stories that matter. What part of Vivian's story stayed with you the most? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading.